us increase the number of more monsters, more players, more stuff going on, and we know that the density in Nightmare Dungeons in particular needs to go up, and so we've been working on that to make sure that we can accomplish that. So density in Helltide will go up, not uniformly. Density in Nightmare Dungeons will go up uniformly, and these will be substantial increases.
Yep. Which I know players have been talking about constantly.
Yeah.
Wanting additional density on those.
Right, rightly so.
A big topic right now is inventory concerns. We've heard from players. I know we've talked about gems and so forth actually becoming materials in Season 2, which to help out with some inventory concerns specifically. I know you guys have information, at least in regards to stash, and what might be coming in 1.1.1.
Yes. So certainly the gem change is still coming in Season 2, like you said, but we need more stash help now, right? And so in 1.1.1, we're going to be adding an additional stash tab for players so they can store more aspects, more Malignant Hearts.
Yeah, this has been like an ongoing conversation every week inside the dev team of like, do we feel that we're ready to do this yet? Do we feel that we're ready to do this yet? Like the density conversation, that conversation. The engineering team been working really, really hard to like make the adjustments possible for us. And there's more that we're doing. This is now a never-ending conversation. Like, what else can we do? What else can we be doing? But like we definitely heard bring them in as early as 1.1.
Yeah. Oh, and I should mention that along with the stash tab, we're making a small change to Elixir stack size. We're going to bring that up to 99. So that'll help.
Awesome. Obviously, like with new start seasons, if you do have these types of changes that occur within the patch that may change, whether it's the meta or the balance of specific things. There's been questions related to respecs and how that has been pretty expensive on people's their own personal economies with gold and so forth. I know we have respec changes that are also coming with the game itself. And you guys probably give more specific numbers.
Yeah, I mean this really goes back. And Joe was talking about our commitment to choice earlier, and it also, but I think it also goes back to when we say in the mission statement we want to have a wide variety of viable builds. Great, but if you can't switch between those builds, then it still feels punishing, right? So we're going to bring respec costs down by about 40%, quite a bit.
Yeah, so it should help out with people that want to switch over to a different build and so forth, or they do have to adjust over to another build. They get the option of actually being able to do so, or have an easier option.
And that'll be in 1.1.1.
And that'll be in 1.1.1. And then I know, lastly, one big thing is, as players kind of progress through the game and the leveling curve kind of goes through, especially post 70 or so, even looking at the player journey and how they've been getting up to 100. I know there's some changes that you guys are looking at in terms of experience and so forth on that end.
Yeah, I mean the short version is we want to make leveling from 50 to 100 faster by adjusting XP. I don't know if you have.
Yeah, I realized when I was talking earlier about the changes we made. Obviously, we also made the change to XP game with fighting your level. I failed to mention discussing it.
Yeah.
So the original intent for that was we found players basically sitting at fighting creatures 3 levels above them and never felt like they were really challenging themselves beyond that. We wanted to stretch that out a bit further, but that went from a 25% bonus to a 15% bonus. And we knew that density changes were coming online. We thought about this a little bit, but I read a lot of feedback afterwards in particular that just made it sound like people thought they were trying to make the game take longer. It wasn't actually the goal, but realized the 25%, 15% change did constitute nerve adult medicine things as well.
We are not trying to slow down the game.
No, and to that point, we have a vision for how long we want the game to take for players. We realized that it's taking a little bit longer than that, than what our vision was originally for a lot of folks who are leveling up, particularly when they get to certain parts of the game, when they're World Series 3 and 4.
Yeah.
So we are looking to like really to readjust the XP rates for those areas, because we aren't looking to like have you hit this absolute brick wall when you hit like level 70 or something, right? Like there's not like these moments where you're going to feel like you just can't, or 75. Like, you know, we don't want you to have this feeling that you just can't make progress artificially. In fact, that's never been the biggest goal, right? Just, it ended up working out that it wasn't the players weren't returning to the race you expected. So these are like we are making changes in this regard to kind of bring this down a bit. Yeah.
And I mean, you've seen certainly we did things like increase the XP bonus for Nightmare Dungeon a while back, quite substantially.
And whisper completion helped by challenge.
Right. Now, notwithstanding that, there are changes to XP related to addressing, you know, the power leveling case, because we don't have like group up, have fun with your friends, like power leveling each other. The only case that we think is not very fun is the case where one person is standing at the entrance of the dungeon and the other person is having all the fun killing monsters.
Yeah.
And so, you know, when we look at the balance of the XP changes in 1.1.0, we think that additional changes need to be made to make the game faster, especially between 50 and 100.
Yeah, we want level 1 to 100 to feel like an achievement, but not like a job, right? So like we want to make some adjustments, make sure that it feels fun, very achievable, obviously, in the season timeline. But yeah, so we are going to make some adjustments. I think we'll talk about more probably next week in terms of with more specificity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very soon.
Yep. So again, we'll be back on stream next Friday to talk about all the details of the changes, including the barb and like sorcerer changes that Joe had mentioned, along with other changes that we are preparing right now for the patch itself. That patch itself is supposed to be hitting in the next couple of weeks. Obviously, if we're doing the stream on Friday, it means it's coming pretty darn soon for after that stream. So, but we did want to make sure that we got in front of players to actually talk to them about everything, and we plan on doing that going forward. If we ever have one of these larger patches that actually make some pretty significant changes within the game, we'll either get in front of you guys via stream or we'll end up posting about them earlier so that you guys get a better idea of what's to come for those. I know that we do want to take some questions, a bunch of questions actually from chat and so forth. I know one big question that has always kind of come up has been about leaderboards and so forth within, and the expectation of when those might be coming in. I know that ideally we're aiming for Season 3 for the leaderboards in itself. I don't know if you guys have any like additional information or like additional insight onto those from your end.
Yeah, so one thing that's really important to us for leaderboards in Diablo 4 is that we don't think that like tying this directly to Nightmare Dungeons or content type exactly like that is going to make a lot of sense because the variety of the nature of the system. So we want to make a content type that kind of partners directly with leaderboards so that you can be judged in kind of like this kind of more even playing field when you're going through that experience. But that is content that we are actively in development on and are excited to try to get ready for Season 3. So we're going to be making, I'm sorry, the short answer to this is, we'll be set of our competitive feature. We are making a specific content type that goes alongside that you're judging yourself against, and we're looking for Season 3 for that.
Question from You Stupid Walrus is Uber Uniques, what's the future? They mathematically don't exist, so I don't think it's a good waste of resources of them.
Sorry, I was really distracted by the walrus.
Okay.
Can you read the question again?
Uber Uniques.
Oh, right.
What's the future? They mathematically don't exist, so I don't think it's good to waste resources on them in the future.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, Uber Uniques are designed in such a way that they are a huge spike of power, and we're receiving feedback, and we understand the feedback on some of them, but they represent a huge spike of power, and as such are not expected to be part of builds necessarily. One of our goals underlying is we don't want players to feel that one of these are mandatory that you must find in an effort to bring your build online. From the ground up, we kind of made the decision to say it is okay if we want players to find these, but we don't want them to expect to find these. Which is a difficult place to balance in terms of drop rates when you're thinking about those. Now, right now, I believe that they are exceedingly rare, and we do want them to feel very, very rare. But I suspect that as we start moving into future seasons, we do want to find more ways for players, more opportunities for players to get chances at these. And I imagine we will talk about that soon. But I would suggest that like the current drop rates are probably not going to be the drop rates forever. We'll probably make things a little bit more common, a little more likely to be found as time goes on.
A big topic that I'm seeing just pop up in chat and so forth. A lot of comments about crowd control,
Sure.
and if there's any plans or ways that we're looking at addressing crowd control here in the future.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier in the stream, well, I think we both talked about it. We think that when you have high density of monsters on screen and you have a lot of elites, the crowd control, the tools that you have for crowd control are not easy better. And some of that is going to be adjustments to things that feel unfair. Some of that is going to be adjustments to tools. I think that we'll be able to, this is something that we'll be able to be more specifics in how we're going to address that, but we agree it's a problem.
Question from I'm so bad. IK Rekoat. I tried. I'm so bad with names. I'm sorry. When will loadouts be added?
Yeah, it's a feature that the UI team is very excited about. It's something we've talked about a bit internally. We don't have a timeline for the idea of loadouts just yet, but it is something that we're continuing to actively talk about. When we have more information to share in terms of like when this could potentially be added down the list, we'll talk about it. Vera0 says, what is the time frame on 111? It doesn't seem very clear. Is it before the middle of the season? How long do I need to wait for Sorcerer and Barbs to have their changes and be playable? It is much sooner than mid-season. As I said, it's only like a couple weeks away, and by a couple weeks I mean like very, very soon. Like if we're doing a stream on Friday, I would expect it within a couple days after this. We have to provide some. If we say anything too specific today, production will show those out. So we have to be very careful about the length.
Yeah,
very soon.
Only because with patches themselves, of course, there are. We're on a lot of different platforms and everything, and of course, those go through certification. If a certification gets pushed back or whatnot, then we obviously need to readjust schedules. So it's hard for us to actually put a specific time until that actually occurs. But very, very soon. BaldB79, are there any plans for some changes for experience between, say, level 75 to 100? This is actually something that we just commented on, but the journey feels a bit dull. There are several events, but only nightmare dungeons to provide challenge. World bosses, Hell Tides, and Whispers are a good idea, but just too easy.
Yeah, there's so we talked about. So I guess there's two real parts of this. Are we making changes to the XP progression for players while they're moving through, like World Tier 4 in this case? And the answer is yes. We are going to be looking at making changes to that. We'll talk about more about that soon. And then, secondly, do we feel that there are the right number of like milestones for players to engage with? Enough goals to kind of like consume while you're also leveling up. Enough content to kind of do as you're leveling up in these World Tiers. And I think that the answer is no. That we know that there's more things that we need to add to the game, particularly for World Tier 4. But really just once you get into World Tier 3 and 4, just want to find more opportunities and more content and new things for players to do as they're leveling up in the space. And we do have plans for those things. We do have thoughts on stuff we want to add in particular and some things we're looking to talk about forward. But yeah, we recognize that there's more we would like to add to that journey to kind of create more variety and more moments of challenge as well while you're progressing. Not just at 100 but all along the way.
Kodoc24 says, what are your plans to adjust loot drops? This, I'm going to add on to this question after I read it. It feels very frustrating to grind for days without ever seeing anything close to an upgrade or finding the right aspect. Even worse, when you finally do it and it's a terrible roll. Slightly, I'm also going to modify that and mention target farming, which has also been a topic within the community. I'm not sure if you guys want to have any plans and so forth.
So I think there's a couple parts of this as well, right? There's the idea of I grind for a long time to get an item, and the item is not an upgrade. Particularly when you're in World Series 3 or 4, when you start dealing with sacred items and ancestral items, where you're kind of dealing with a larger bucket of high power range, which certainly tend to be true, unless you're looking for specific kinds of affixes, you're looking for particular kinds of roles, right? So there's a couple things. One, we know we want to try to reduce the difficulty of like kind of comparing and looking at a number of different items all at once and trying to get a better sense of that. These are things the UI team is very passionate about. Conversations are ongoing in terms of how we want to achieve that. Like things like loot filters, things like that. There's the idea of like how does the progression of itemization feel, particularly in World Tier 4, while you're leveling up there. And the systems team has ideas on things they would like to do. It's early for us to say exactly, to like really lay them all out just now. But there are ideas that we want to do to kind of improve the feeling and progression through the different tier. I feel like there's more thresholds, there's more opportunities to kind of get upgrades as you go. And then lastly, there's this idea of target farming. So legendary aspects are a place I think that we can afford to do more. We know that players are looking for certain aspects, they're trying to find certain things, they're trying to find particularly unique items, I think is often the case. Right? They want the Tempest Roar, whatever they're looking for that thing. We do have plans in Season 2 right now to have more content try to target farm in order to find unique items. And I think there's a natural extension of that to go like, what's the right way for players to be able to find an easier method of getting into the aspects they might be looking for as they're progressing. So that is something that the rewards and systems teams will be thinking about and we'll talk about soon on screen.
Yeah, and I do want to note, like, I know we have an update here coming there are going to be other patches before Season 2 and so forth,
yes,
with additional changes and items that we just haven't noted, and I just want to clarify specifically. We do have more patches beyond 1.1 before Season 2 to address a lot of feedback that we're receiving from players and a lot of opportunities for us to actually do so. Can we get some sort of matchmaking system to help with partying up with random people or group finders? I know we had talked about group finders before. I know this is something that the team has obviously received feedback about, like helping out with like the social systems and so forth within the game. It is being evaluated, I know, and the teams are looking at it. We just don't have an exact timeline of when those are actually coming in specifically on it. Are there going to be changes with ARM? Oh, sorry, I forgot to. That was Andy for Man was the last question. BeanPot10 says, are there going to be changes with armor regarding survivability? Hardcore is almost unplayable on Sorcerer with one-shots from corpse bows and low innate, due to low innate.
Yeah, I think survivability, especially on Sorcerer, is something that the changes that Joe was talking about for that we'll be talking about in more detail next week. It's one of the things we want to we recognize that.
Yeah, we also identified there are a few outstanding monster types and abilities that are doing that are killing players a little more frequently than we expect. And like we're looking at creatures that explode when they die, claim an awful lot of lives. Right? Creatures that can chill, claim an awful lot of lives, right?
Or charging creatures, we've also learned.
And charging creatures, yeah.
I've seen a lot of reports about that, and I know, Ed, you're about
which I think have been nerfed like twice now.
Well, there's a bug fix on Beast Charge in particular, where Beast Charge could deal damage even if you interrupted the charge or if you died.
Oh, I see. So, well, that's a good bug fix. So, I mean, we're identifying some of these like really, really difficult affixes, really, really difficult nightmare dungeon affixes, or like really ones that claim lots, like a disproportionate amount of player lives as part of that. And we're looking at those all at once. Sorcerer survivability is absolutely an issue, and we're going to be talking about it more in the 1.1.1 conversation next week. But there's also this idea of like there's a lot of things out there that are just doing a lot of like what feels to the player in the moment pretty cheap, like unfair, like just I sort of just died, don't really see what happened. And we're looking at more of these situations and trying to figure out the right places to put them. We don't want the game to be easy. We don't want you to be able to walk through every encounter, and we want the game to feel deadly at times. We want you to feel like you have an opportunity to kind of evade or deal with those situations.
In regards to someone, Zeus DNA says we'll be seeing the hotfix notes before the hotfix comes out today. Yeah, we'll get the notes up. The deployment hasn't started and it's not starting until later this afternoon, but we'll get the notes up so that players can see it, and we'll be mentioning it so that players can actually read through them and so forth.
Right.
This is a pretty large hotfix in terms of like items that we're actually fixing and the Nightmare Dungeon stuff that we had just talked about.
Yep.
Templar Knights asks, question, can we change the codex in such a way that we can upgrade the values with founded legendary items? This could reduce the demand to stash, avoid aspects laying around, easier adopting player to your balance changes, but we still want to find items and increase codex values.
Yeah, so we know that one of the key things that players are carrying in their stash right now are lots and lots of aspects.
Yeah.
And we're talking about ways to address that. That's an interesting suggestion. That I think it's sort of going toward the same direction here, which is like, how can we address the case where your stash is completely full of aspects? Certainly having an extra stash tab will not hurt that problem, but I think there's more that we'd like to do in terms of the aspects.
Yeah, it's certainly something we've been discussing internally for a while. I think part of this is just how much fun is it to be able to extract an aspect from an item and be able to maintain that role? And then how much is that fun so fun that it's worth like some of the inventory pressure that comes about as a result of that? And that's a conversation we've had within the dev team. We're going to continue to talk about it, but we know that there's definitely a lot of improvements we can make to the Codex of Power, for example, to kind of like be embracing some of these other like affix extraction systems.
Question from DRJ16, has the team considered how certain nerfs like weapon cooldown reduction are so much more impactful for certain classes than others?
Yes, the team is definitely aware that some of these changes disproportionately affect, like the vulnerable damage change disproportionately affecting like cold swords. There is we're definitely aware that some of these changes disproportionately affect some classes and builds more than others. And this goes back to my earlier point about when we're going to be making changes like this moving forward, that we know we're going to have this have an overall effect of reducing certain effects down, or rather reducing certain like powers or affixes or whatever it is, down to a place where we want people to use the baseline to kind of build from for other parts of the game. That when we do those things, it's going to affect these different players in different ways, and they're not going to enjoy that if we've ruined their build in order to try to weed the garden and get things into a better place. Like ultimately, we're going to be trying to do a lot more situations where if we're going to take a thing away, if we're going to update something, where it's no longer going to be as valuable as part of your build, we want to provide a lot of other options as part of that. Make sure we don't leave the build with a gaping like giant hole in it as a result of the change that we made. So this is going to, again, it's going to mean that moving forward, when we're making like larger scale balance and tuning adjustments, we're going to do those a little bit more slowly. As a result, in order to make sure that we're embracing all of these other like components to give a lot of options all at once when we make a change.
Yeah, it goes back to the change we had on the screen before, right? We're going to provide compelling alternatives when we make those kind of changes.
That's a punchy way to say it.
Kennywa says, question, why did you guys increase the cast time on stuff like leaving dungeons? It feels like you're trying to slow down the game by making it slow time for
we can look at that. We can continue to evaluate that change. It's a fairly small difference. I know that an ARPG, small amounts of time can be meaningful. We did add the reset dungeon button back in. It does require that you're outside the dungeon, and so there's kind of a loop there.
Loki5123 asks, are you going to add more than 6 or 7 items a season? Are there plans to add more? The feeling is they feel like they want more items per season that are actually added in.
Yeah, we've always said that we wanted to take in the feedback from the players as we kind of got these seasons out the door. So season 1, we add the 32 Malignant Hearts, which I think have been pretty cool. We're going to be looking at the balance. Some of them kind of like lift them up, make them a little more exciting in some places. But broadly, we're pretty happy. They generally are. And then we have our uniques and our legendary items we added with the season as well. I think if we see that there's like a lot of interest in trying to get more of these, we can start trying to think about how we can inject a few more legendaries into the game with each season, or a couple more uniques potentially in the game with each season. But we want to continue to see like kind of what the feedback looks like. This is a good example of people asking for more. So yeah, good to know.
Separately from that, like, are you guys looking at potentially like reworking or redoing
thank you,
some things?
So that means patch 1.1.1 is kind of in that vein of trying to like get these things into a slightly better place. And we do want to go back over our existing legendary power library and identify the ones where they can afford to be lifted up with redesigns and changing the way that some parts of them work, so they better fulfill the stated purpose in terms of where they're supposed to sit in builds. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities for that along the way as well. It's not going to be the only way we inject like new fun in the game isn't going to just be through the season mechanic, isn't just going to be through the addition of brand new legendaries and uniques, but also going back over the existing legendary powers after we see players use them a little bit more, making adjustments accordingly.
Question from Panda Mousy and Mormra. Same question actually. What's your plan for resistances? Right now they feel like a wasted stat. Do we have any changes to resistances that might be changing maybe sooner or later, or how's that?
Resistances fall in one of those categories where if we need to make a change to the way that resistance damage is, or rather, the way that players use resistance to mitigate damage from certain sources. And it's going to be a far-reaching change when we actually go through and make this, which means we want to be able to take the time with it and do it properly. It's going to be, right now we plan to put that into Season 2 as part of a larger rework. So you can look forward to more information as we get a little bit closer to Season 2.
Shadow Mun, sorry. Can campaign bosses be added to the pool of dungeon bosses that we encounter? I feel like campaign bosses are underutilized.
I think there could be more opportunities to fight some of those campaign bosses in the future. I can't comment further on exactly how that will look, but I agree with that sentiment.
Sounds good. Okay.
Joe has often said this, so like we definitely want to make sure we find the right ways to bring act bosses in. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is actually a question. Party Cannon 30. Hi there, guys. Can you? Thanks for the information. My question is about crashes on PlayStation 5. Is that a known issue? We are aware of some issues on consoles, specifically Xbox, PlayStation, like that may be having crash issues and whatnot from their side. I do want to note, like, I know with 1.10 there was a bug fix towards a specific memory leak that the team was trying to identify and find, and they actually did find it, and it was addressed there. There was actually an additional fix in 1.11 because I've seen a lot of questions, whether on Reddit and so forth, about PC performance and so forth, and even on like just performance in general, that will be addressed there. And I know that the engineers here are still actively, troubleshooting and figuring out like specific situations that players might be running into. Of course, if you have like more information on those, please post in console bugs on our forums, and give as much information as possible, because a lot of those repro steps on our side are sometimes really difficult, and it helps our teams out, helps our QA teams out to be able to see if they can actually repro the same type of issues that players are having. Do you guys plan on introducing more ways? Oh, sorry, this is Mr. I don't want to butcher that.
Okay.
Do you guys plan on introducing more craft / modify gear? Currently, only gold has value, and only one stack can be rolled.
More ways to craft and modify gear.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, we do want to add more options for players to kind of modify the items they're getting. What we have really in the preseason and now the season 1 stage is still very like a baseline experience in terms of item modification. We are looking at more opportunities in the future to allow players to do more with their items. So yeah, that is a plan for the future.
The Almighty Striker says, why does the Necrominions why do they take ability slots? It could be easily a different button. How many of Necrominion builds have beat Uber Lilith? Lots of questions about, is there, we already answered the drop rates for uniques and so forth. That was the second part of the question. But I guess the question mostly is about Necromancer minions and ability slots. Also, I saw other questions related to companions, like whether they're Druid companions with wolves or Necromancer minions. If there's any changes or plans for those to actually potentially get a little bit more tweaked up.
Yeah, this is something we do care about. One of the things that that sounded dismissive.
Yeah, we care about a lot of things, but go on.
What I was just trying to get to another point, which is there's some really cool stuff in some of the Malignant Hearts that affects this, in terms of like kind of getting credit for additional abilities.
Yeah.
And we do care a lot about the number of the sort of like ratio of ability to number of slots that it takes up, and making that as optimal as possible.
Yeah, that's right. We want to make sure that if you're going to play a Necromancer and you're going to summon skeletons, that you are going to be. I mean, that takes up that's the weight of an ability. You know, like it's the same as having an active. You know, you need to like playing with it. It's going to take a little bit of space in your bar. You don't get that in addition to a bunch of other things. If you don't want to have skeletons on your bar right now, the idea that you would sacrifice a lot of those skills in order to give you that extra space. And in terms of the viability of like minion builds at various parts of the game, there are some builds that are able to like get pretty deep into content, obviously, but I think there's still room for improvement in terms of like minion survivability and other conversations along those lines. That is something that's still happening. And then there was the other conversation, the question about Druid companions, right?
Yeah, kind of similar to Necromancer minions, and people were asking like, can that ever be a viable thing?
Yeah, I think possibly. We see players. Actually, there are a few players that run like literally all 3 companion skills and use that as part of the build that they'll go after for their druid. And I think that there's likely room here to do more with companion skills. Whether it rises to the full level of like a complete like spec, I think is going to be interesting. But I know that there's people on the team that are very excited about trying to explore more of this side of the druid over time. But we don't have there aren't as many interconnecting points for the way that you interact with your companions right now, and the way that like the skeleton army does for the Necromancer, in terms of ways that you modify them and do more with them. So I think there's some groundwork we need to do to like provide a lot more options there, but something that the team's interested in. Yeah.
I'm gonna do one last question here, which is, will there be better loot tables for like treasure goblins, any alternate goblin types specifically for those?
Yeah, I think we loved how many, D3 has like all kinds of goblins. There's like 10 different kinds of goblins, or 14 maybe. It's been a little while since I looked at that data. Had that in the editor, but we think that there's lots of room for there to be more fun goblin types.
And in terms of the treasure goblins have the to provide, we actually I had a conversation with the lead designer last week talking about this. We are going to be making we are going to be buffing like legendary drop chance, for example, from items in gold here to goblins. We want them to feel a little bit more exciting when the moment gets up.
Cool. Well, I know we talked about a lot today. And I just want to recap some stuff that we had mentioned today. Obviously, we're hearing a lot of feedback regarding the patch, and we're telling you guys now that we completely hear you loud and clear. We don't plan on doing patches like this ever again, where we're not going to be essentially removing the fun and the player power from players drastically like this. Yeah. And if we ever do that, for any type of class, like a build or whatnot, we'll make sure that there's always some really good alternatives for players to actually be able to try out a different build that will also be boosted way back up to kind of help out and give other options for players to actually kind of jump into. And we will ourselves do a better job of course, communicating back to the community. Again, what we're saying now is that we will be getting patch notes in front of the community way earlier in advance, whether through a campfire chat or through like a blog of some sort or any type of communication, so that you guys can get a better chance of looking at patch notes beforehand, seeing any type of changes that might be coming down beforehand, because I think communication was key here. I think you guys not seeing what we were planning on doing and us kind of giving that vision really affected a lot of the response from you guys. And I think if we just provided that over to everyone and gave a little bit more of a heads up, I think it would have helped a whole lot there from that specific situation.
Well, also keeping in mind, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that's absolutely one part of it, and you were talking about it in a more full way, but I want to really make sure I hit on, like, one of the really great points of feedback that we've been seeing is like, why can you nerf things today and then buff things far in the future, right? And so what we're saying is, not only is there a change to communication, but we're also going to pair changes like that together so that we don't have exactly a situation that players have called out as that.
Yep. And of course, with 111 coming really soon, we are committing to another Campfire Chat next week, next Friday. Probably the same time, we'll confirm. More than likely it'll be 11 a.m. on Friday. We'll end up posting about the details over the next week. That just as a reminder to the community. And there we'll actually go through all the changes that we just talked about here.